Ever since President Trump lost the 2020 election and his presidency as a result, the US has been moving forward with President Biden as their leader. However, there are still a few of President Trump's political decisions that America is still recovering from. Today, I'll be talking about whether or not the Trump's steel tariff policy was a disaster or not. And to put it simply, it was a complete disaster. But to talk about it in more detail, I'll first talk about any benefits that this tariff policy had and for the steel industry and what the harms were, and then later on I'll give a brief overview of what the final outcome was for the steel industry as a result of the imposition of this tariff, as a result of of this tariff. So to start off, the tariff did not really benefit domestic steel workers as much as it should have, but it did have a bit of a significant benefit for them. So, for some time, as US companies started losing the incentive to trade with foreign companies due to the huge price they would have to pay at the end of every year as a result of the tariff, which could amount to potentially $3 billion, the domestic steel makers were sought out more. The Wall Street Journal wrote on October 28, 2020, that the tariffs succeeded in pushing down steel imports, and for a short amount of time resulted in higher prices for domestic steel makers, which is pretty obvious because if you can't have foreign imports, you're going to obviously seek out the domestic people. But as you can guess from that quote, this was a very short term impact. It lasted a short amount of time. So this benefit really didn't benefit the people as much as it should have. Now, on to the harms. The whole of US steel industry suffered a lot due to this tariff, but one of the states that suffered the most due to this tariff was Michigan, and I'll explain that. In 2016, in his presidency campaign, Trump promised to revitalize the steel industry through the tariffs imposed on steel, which was a key point in helping him gain Michigan's electoral college votes, and this helped him win the presidency against Hillary Clinton that year. However, after the tariff was set in place, Michigan's residents started losing their jobs rapidly, and this was due to what they were promised would bring them abundance, which was the tariff. However, on a national scale, Reuters talks about this more in detail. They talk about the losses that occurred, and on October 9, 2020, they wrote that nationally, steel and aluminum tariffs resulted in at least 75,000 job losses in metal-using industries by the end of that year. So basically, what happened was, due to this tariff on a national scale in the US, around 75,000 people lost their jobs in the metal using industries. So this is quite a significant loss, especially when instead of loss, we should have been seeing some growth instead. However, it really, out of all of the states, Michigan is reported to have suffered the most. And now, finally, the important thing to look at is just how much damage this failure cost the US, especially the steel industry. So, not only did employees lose their jobs, but the overall price of steel had also gone down. Foreign Affairs wrote on May 7, 2020, that in reality, the steel tariffs were a costly failure. Steel prices ended that year 14% lower than when the tariff was imposed by Trump. And during that period, steel mill employment rose at just half the rate of overall private sector job growth, and the stock prices of US steel firms fell 20%. Now, this is quite a mouthful, so I'm going to explain it a little bit. So, the US um, saw harms in three regards. One was employment, the next was the price of steel, and then the last one was the stock price of U.S. steel firms. So just as the statistics say, we talked in the previous argument about how 75,000 people lost their jobs, which was a huge blow to the employment. It shouldn't have happened, and instead, new jobs should have been created and the employment should have increased because of this tariff. However, that was not the case. But furthermore, the price of steel fell down 14% than when the tariff was first imposed, when the tariff was set in place. 14% is quite a big amount of loss, especially considering how this tariff was supposed to be helping the steel industry. And then, moreover, the price of the U.S. steel firms also fell down 20%. And so, seeing a negative growth, well, not growth, seeing it these consequences and something that was supposed to have been a great sort of opportunity, a great thing for the steel industry, it really shows us that steel tariff, this tariff policy was a complete disaster. So while President Trump might not be president anymore, America's still probably going to need a lot more time than expected to recover from his policies, especially the steel industries with this steel tariff policy. And today we basically covered whether or not the steel tariff policy was a disaster. And in short, yes, it was. It was a major disaster, especially for the steel industry. And this is because the only benefit that they saw was a temporary increased interest in domestic steel makers rather than foreign companies. And then, but the major harms that we saw was a large increase in unemployment, 75,000 job losses that year, and moreover, we also saw decreases in the price of steel, which was 14% lower than when the tariff first was set in place. And then we also saw a huge fall in the stock price of these U.S. steel firms, which was 20%. So overall, this tariff really did nothing but harm for the U.S. steel industry, and it's probably going to take some time for them to recover from this tariff policy that was supposed to have helped them instead of causing all of this damage. So that's it.